After you've known your friend, colleague, coworker, classmate, acquaintance, or even a potential romantic partner for more than a little while, you're probably going to start to care about them. You're probably going to feel affectionate towards them. So how can you express this affection or show your affection in English without sounding awkward, uncomfortable, inappropriate, or even rude? Today we're going to talk about how to use terms of endearment in English. Now keep in mind that terms of endearment vary between countries. So if you're just translating the same type of word you would use in your native language into English, there's a chance that you may sound a little awkward or not quite appropriate for the situation. Affection is very cultural, and what might be okay in one language is not necessarily okay in English. I want to tell you a little bit about the words and expressions you can use in order to show affection in English, and talk about situations where they're okay. This discussion was inspired by a comment on my other video, How to Politely Address People in English. So I decided it was really important to give more details on how to show affection in English. Before we get into the vocabulary you can use in order to show affection in English, I want to talk about two key points. Number one is that tone matters. Your tone when showing affection is key to showing the person that you truly care about them. Otherwise, you might sound like you're being sarcastic or you don't really mean what you say. Maybe you sound a little insincere. So tone is really going to matter, and it's going to vary depending on your relationship with the person. A lot of times we tend to use a higher pitch when we're showing affection to somebody else. Think about baby talk. When you see a little baby and you go, "Oh my gosh, you're so cute." You say something to them like, "Whoa." We tend to use that kind of pitch when showing affection to other people. And before you ask, this is also true for men. Men will also use a slightly higher pitch in order to show affection with someone they truly care about, and they may even use baby talk. Don't worry, I won't tell anybody. The other thing to keep in mind is that context really matters. How well do you know the person? Is it a professional environment? What's your relationship with the person? Are they someone in a position of authority above you? Are they somebody you know well or not so well? Are they somebody that you trust or somebody that you just enjoy the company of? How old is the person? How old are you? Where are you? Is the situation where you want to use this term of endearment appropriate? All of these things are key to understanding when to use particular vocabulary words to show affection in English. So let's get started looking at the different language you can use in order to show affection in English. Let's start with the word dear. You may already be familiar with the word dear because it is often used in order to address a formal letter or even an email in English. And a lot of people are familiar with the word dear because a version of it is used in their native language. But the thing I want you to understand about the word dear is that it's a little bit old-fashioned. That's why it's starting to fall out of favor in emails, because now people prefer to use hi or hello instead of dear when writing emails, because dear is a little bit old-fashioned and it shows a level of familiarity that you may not have earned with the other person. In formal letters, you will still see people use the word dear, but in emails, it's becoming more and more common to use hi or hello instead. Now, the word dear in American English tends to be a word that's used with somebody who's significantly older than you in showing kind of kindness and affection towards you. Think of a senior citizen, an older woman who's saying, "Oh, thank you so much, dear. That was really helpful." You may also hear it in the South where people tend to show a little more affection through their words and be a little more polite. But in everyday speech, I don't really hear that many people call me dear that I don't know. I receive a lot of emails from non-native speakers where they say, "Oh, thank you, dear," and it actually sounds a little awkward or uncomfortable. It shows me they don't know that much about how the word dear works in American culture. So I would refrain from using the word dear with somebody you don't know. Dear tends to only really be used by somebody older than you who's speaking to you as if you're much younger. I'm thinking of an older senior citizen talking to a teenager or even a young girl or boy. So dear is something to not use that commonly. The thing that I do use with friends that I have known for a while is I say my dear, right? So I say hello, my dear, and usually this is over text message or WhatsApp. It's not something I usually say in speech. It's something I'm more likely to type. So some people do say my dear, but I would only say this with somebody that I know personally and I know very well. Another related word that you may be thinking about is the word darling. Darling is even more old-fashioned than dear. You don't really hear a lot of people using the word darling, even to show love and affection towards their romantic partner. It's a little bit weird. We tend to make jokes with the word darling, like saying, darling, oh darling, that's so sweet of you. And so you'll hear people kind of talking about one of those older famous film stars, oh darling, thank you so much for your help, right? They'll start putting on airs and accents in order to show this level of high class, high level of society. But you really don't hear it that much with everyday people. Darling is just not that common, and you should definitely not use darling in a professional situation. Just like darling, I probably wouldn't use my darling either, because that's something that sounds a little old-fashioned. You may hear people use my darling in older movies that are almost a century old, or books that are even older than that. But in general, Americans don't use my darling or darling, and you should probably avoid it. Now let's talk about honey and its shortened version, hun. Now, honey and hun are slightly more common. I now think of somebody who's about middle-aged talking to their child or talking to someone that they know. You'll also sometimes hear it in a store when someone's being kind to you. And I definitely went through a phase many years ago where I used the word honey with almost everybody. So people sometimes use the word honey in an expression like, oh, honey, what did you do? Oh, honey, don't do that, right? They use it as kind of like a soft way to give somebody a little bit of criticism or feedback that they're not sure they want to hear. But of course, I would only use hun or honey with somebody I'm close with, a family member or a friend or even a romantic partner. It really depends on your relationship with that person and the types of affection that you show each other, the words you use in order to show affection. Some people might use honey, other people won't. Now, honey might be something that you hear a little more in the American South for the reasons I just mentioned. People tend to be a little kinder and a little sweeter towards people they don't know in the American South. I'm not from the South and I've only traveled there, so I'm not an expert on that, but you'll hear people use the word honey and sugar in more casual situations. But I would probably avoid using it because I'm not from the South and it would sound a little weird with my accent from the North. So now let's talk about sweetie and sweetheart. Now, I think sweetie is a little more common than sweetheart these days. I think it's the abbreviation of sweetheart. Both of these words are things you're definitely going to hear parents say to their kids or grandparents say to their grandkids. I probably wouldn't use it in the reverse direction. I wouldn't say it to my parents or my grandparents. So sweetie or sweetheart is something that shows affection, especially in a family situation. You may also hear people who are older speak to kids and people who are much younger than them with this type of term of endearment. It's something to show a little bit love, caring, and affection towards kids. I probably wouldn't use it between adults around the same age, although I think you also might hear some salespeople or people in the service industry use it when they're talking and interacting with a customer for a long time. You will hear it occasionally, but I wouldn't encourage you to use it unless you're 100% sure that you can show affection to that person. As for romantic relationships, I don't really think people use sweetie or sweetheart that much these days. Let's talk about what's a little bit more common these days. Now, in a romantic relationship, people are much more likely to use the word babe or baby, although I think babe is a little more common. And now there's a slang term, bae, B-A-E, that people are also using in order to refer to their romantic partners. And you'll also hear people use boo, B-O-O. Whether you use babe, baby, bae, or boo with your partner really will depend on your relationship. You may have used the word babe with your ex-boyfriend, but you might not use it with your current boyfriend. Maybe you use completely different terms of affection. But I definitely wouldn't suggest using babe, baby, bae, or boo with someone you don't know well. It sometimes happens that women will use hey baby to each other, like woohoo, look at you, you looked really nice, and say hey baby, like they might use it as a joke. And sometimes you may hear male friends use it with their female friends, but I really don't think it's that common because you want to make sure you have that kind of relationship with someone. So that one I would say is up to you and up to your own risk to use that phrase, but definitely don't use it with someone in a position of authority. It's not professional whatsoever, and it is a little weird. Another one I've seen people use before is the word lady. Now, we don't use my lady. That makes me think of the British royal family. And I generally will say things like, hey lady, to one of my female friends when sending her a text message. We do the same thing. You may have noticed I say, hey guys. You could say, hey man, even if you're talking to a woman. Hey dude, hey buddy, right? All kinds of different forms of affection that you show using some sort of word that relates to a human being. This is pretty common in American English to say, hey man, hey guys, hey friends, hey what's up. People also sometimes use swear terms with their friends, but that's a level of familiarity that you need to have and you need to have earned with your friends. Something else that you may want to consider is by saying, hey beautiful, hey gorgeous. You may hear some women say, hey beautiful and hey gorgeous to each other in order to encourage them and make them feel like they have higher self-esteem and self-confidence. But if you're saying, hey beautiful, hey gorgeous to your friend and they look at you funny, it's probably not okay to say. I think it's a little weird when men say, hey beautiful or hey gorgeous to me and I don't know them and they're not my romantic partner or somebody that I trust. So I really don't suggest using it unless you're in a very close relationship with the person. Now let's talk about two terms of endearment that are more common in British English and aren't really that common in American English. The first one is love. I've heard my British friends refer to me as love, just like I would say, hey lady, they might say, hey love, in order to show affection. The other one is doll. I don't really hear people say doll that much anymore. There is an expression, oh, you're a doll, which means you're nice. And sometimes you might hear that in the American South, but it's really not that common, so I don't suggest including it in your vocabulary just yet. So I hope I haven't overwhelmed you with all of the different ways you can show affection in English and when you should and shouldn't use these particular expressions. If you have any questions, be sure to leave a comment below the video and ask away because it can be confusing and a little more complex than it needs to be. But let's move on to talking about a slightly easier way to show affection towards another person. You can use the diminutive. Now the diminutive is when you add the E sound either by adding an IE or a Y to the person's name. This works best for names like mine that end in a consonant, Kim. And so when somebody wants to show me affection, they can call me Kimmy. Now I want to warn you that calling someone like me Kimmy is only acceptable when they're a close friend or a family member. It would be weird if my colleague or coworker started calling me Kimmy and we hadn't moved to that level of friendship. You can be closer friends with your coworkers, but not everybody is going to call you Kimmy. It's a little bit weird. So this is common in American English, is to add the E sound to the end of somebody's name. It really depends on the name and it depends on the person. For example, I've had friends named Katie who have decided that that sounds too immature, too young, so they decided to go by Kate, which sounds a little bit more refined. So you have to be careful, and also it's probably a good idea to check with the person if they feel comfortable with you referring to them in that way. Last but not least, let's talk about nicknames. The most comfortable way to refer to someone that you care about and show affection is to use a nickname. Not everybody has a nickname, but if you start to develop nicknames with the other person, it can feel very comfortable. To be honest, Kim is actually my nickname. My full name is Kimberly. So when somebody calls me Kimberly, it shows me that they don't know me. They just see my name on some sort of official document. I had some managers who called me Kimberly for the 3 years that I worked at the office, and that showed me that they didn't know me at all. They had no personal relationship with me because everyone who worked closely with me called me Kim. So that's something to keep in mind. You want to make sure you ask the person what they want to be referred to by. So nicknames are also sometimes special names. I have a friend named Claire and I often call her Claire Bear because Claire rhymes with bear, Claire Bear, and it's a little bit cute. You may have developed names with your college friends or your high school friends where you call them these little cute names. Maybe you use their last name or you use some sort of inside joke, something that they've developed from something that happened, right? There are some people who have nicknames from when they're kids that stick their whole adult life. So your nicknames may really vary based on the person. So if you hear somebody being referred to by a term that's unfamiliar, ask them if there's a story behind their nickname. It's common for men to refer to other men by their last name. My brother usually goes by his last name with a lot of his college friends, but it really depends on the person and the relationship they have with their friends. So as you can see, there are a lot of ways to show affection in English, but I would definitely encourage you to think about the situation. Think about the person you're talking to and your relationship with them. Like I said, it's not that common to use terms of affection with somebody you don't know well. If this video on how to show affection in English has made you think a little bit more about relationships in English, and you want to talk about the language you use to refer to your friends, acquaintances, and romantic partners, please be sure to check out my free workshop on how to sound more natural when talking about relationships. I'll include the link in the description box below so that you can check it out. Like I said earlier, if you have any questions about the way to show affection in English, please leave me a comment below the video. I know it can be confusing, and there are a lot of different terms you'll probably hear people use to show affection. The most important thing to keep in mind is that you want to consider your relationship with the person and what's appropriate in American culture. Like I said, some people use dear a little more commonly in their culture, but it sounds a little uncomfortable when you're using it with somebody you don't know well in English. So I want you to really think about how it works in American English. What are the terms of affection that you feel most comfortable using in English? Once again, I'm Kim from EnglishWithKim.com. I am your guide to the essential conversation skills you need to sound more natural in English. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up and share it with a friend. And if you have any questions, like I said, go ahead and leave a comment below the video. Have a good one. Goodbye.